Mrs. Kate at the Library of Whispers, and today we're going to take a look through this National Trust magazine for summer 2024. It's now officially summer in the Northern Hemisphere, although in the UK today it's very rainy and a little bit cold, so we had a nicer end of May than we have had a this castle. Legend has it that in the 5th century a boy wizard known as Merdin Emrys, sorry my pronunciation is absolutely appalling, Merlin released 2 dragons that had been trapped in the hill where the king was trying to build a castle. When it was finally built, the hill was named after Merlin. There are remnants of a stone fort dating from the 12th century, but other evidence suggests structures have been here since 1000 BC. And then number 3 is Badbury Rings in Dorset. Badbury evidence, she says, if we had to rely only on what leaders such as Julius Caesar and Tacitus wrote about Roman Britain, we would have a very thin view of what it was actually like. We have to go and dig the stories up and make them material. The National Trust looks after thousands of archaeological sites and landscapes, but every bit of the places in trust care have archaeological potential. The physical evidence for past human activity may be as eye-catching as the stone circle at Avebury in Wiltshire, or as minute as a grain of pollen, says Murray. These clues tell us about the past, but they also provide crucial information about how we should look after nature and history in the centuries to come. Despite the crucial role of archaeology in a human understanding of the past, many of us will never have had the opportunity to join a dig or see archaeological finds outside of a museum. That's why the Council for British Archaeology runs an annual festival of archaeology every summer with online and in-person events across the UK, including at many trust places. Yeah, I think I would have liked to have been an archaeologist, but I don't have the knees for it. So these are archaeologists talking about why they do what they do. This guy was called Martin Papworth. His favourite find is a mystery mosaic at Chedworth Roman Villa, Gloucestershire in 2017 to 23. So it says, Chedworth Roman Villa was founded in the 2nd century AD and reached its heyday around 200 years later. Rediscovered by Victorian archaeologists after years buried in the Gloucestershire Hills, it's now one of the best preserved Roman villas in Britain. Since those early digs, more recent excavations have uncovered the remains of 35 rooms. Several had spectacular mosaic floors, one of which had recently revolutionised the accepted understanding of life in Britain after the Romans left. So this is what he says. Since I joined the Trust in 1986, I've come across all sorts of intriguing artefacts. At Kingston Lacey in Dorset, I saw the skeleton of a Bronze Age woman cradled in the roots of a fallen tree. But my most memorable discovery must be the mosaic in room 28 at Chedworth Roman Villa. When we first excavated the mosaic in 2017, we thought that it had been made in the 4th century, when the villa was in its prime, but the dig revealed that room 28 had been formed by splitting a larger room in two, and we found charcoal fragments that had been incorporated into the dividing wall when it was built, and sent them off for radiocarbon dating. It showed that the wall, and therefore the mosaic, actually dated from the 5th century. At first I couldn't believe it, and in 2023 I temporarily re-excavated a small us to understand the risks that Dinas Dinal is facing and find ways to help the landscape adapt to climate change, both here and at other coastal sites. Okay, let's move on a little bit. So this is the article on the front cover. Coming up, roses. Mottisfont's old-fashioned roses bloom just once a year, reaching their peak in early June as we celebrate 50 years since the precious collection was brought here for everyone to enjoy. The garden team is preparing to face the climate challenges of the future. Lovely place. Okay, let's have a read. The light eases across the garden at Mottisfont in Hampshire, dove grey, fading into shell pink, the beginning of a clear blue sky, foretelling a fine day ahead. An exuberant dawn chorus is already in full swing. Patches of mist veil the roses in their beds, muting and softening their colours, but it hasn't dampened the scent, that sweetening air not yet rid of its early morning chill. A few hours later, the sun's burnt off the vestiges of mist and shines brightly down into throngs of happy visitors. Now the birdsong mingles with voices raised into light as friends and family call out, drawing each other's attention to colours, details, the way the roses are complemented so artfully, set like jewels against the other plants. People pose against tumbling blooms for pictures or stroll down the pathways and pause in a quiet corner to absorb the beauty alone. The red brick walls radiate warmth back into the garden, and everywhere there's the heady scent of roses, now brought to the foreground by the hot sun, pervading and intoxicating. This year, Mottisfont celebrates 50 years as home to the Plant Heritage National Plant Collection, Rosa pre-1900 shrub roses. It's a collection of old-fashioned roses that flower just once a year rather than repeatedly through the summer, as modern varieties do. They were brought together by Graham Stuart Thomas, one of the world's foremost rose experts. Today there are over 1,000 individual rose plants in the garden, and over 417 old-fashioned varieties, all reaching their peak over just a few glorious weeks in June. As the team celebrates the garden's anniversary and history, they're also preparing it for today's climate change challenges and readying it to face the future. Rosarian, I didn't know that was the name of a job, a career. Rosarian Graham Stuart Thomas was given a fuchsia in a pot for his 6th birthday, and by the age of 8 he knew he wanted to become a gardener. Born in 1909 in Cambridge, he began to collect historic roses in his 20s. He had a particular affection for roses from before 1867, often rediscovering them in forgotten corners of gardens, of stately homes, or acquiring them from specialist nurseries that had ceased trading. Only a few species are native to Europe. Most of our modern strains are cultivars descended 19th centuries, when repeat flowering roses arrived from China to fill European gardens. Modern hybrid varieties have been bred to bloom in May or June and keep flowering reliably right through till September, October time, because that's what people want, says Mottisfont's senior gardener Michael Harvey. Old-fashioned roses are known as historic or heirloom roses, were bred from species roses which occurred naturally before gardeners started breeding roses. They contain the original gene pool from which all later roses have been bred. They have graceful forms, soft colours, and often a sweet scent, but they only flower for a week or two, from late May to early June, and then that's it for another year. As his interest and expertise grew, Thomas wrote to renowned arts and crafts garden designer Gertrude Jekyll and was invited to tea at her home, Munstead Wood, which itself came into trust care last year. Jekyll was in her 80s by then, with a formidable reputation for designing gardens as art forms rather than just collections of plants. She prioritised shade and colour combinations above rarity, and repeatedly refined and replanted her borders for the best effect. The meeting had a tremendous impact on the young Thomas and Jekyll. Jekyll's approach made him completely reconsider his own principles. With gardener designer Jim Russell, he became known for considering the visual impact of the whole plant, form and foliage. He wrote books about the history of roses and manuals full of care tips and advice. Thomas's connection with the National Trust began in the late 1940s. He worked at Hidcote, Gloucestershire, an arts and crafts garden in the Cotswolds, when it came into trust care in 1948, and by 1955 he had become the Trust's horticultural advisor. Over the next 2 decades he worked at many of the Trust's most significant gardens, including Mottisfont, and when he was looking for oh wow, look at that. Isn't that amazing? Wow. I bet when they're all in bloom in those few weeks, it's just must be an incredible sight. Okay, somewhere that would care for his precious rose collection for the future, and where people could come to appreciate its beauty, he settled on Mottisfont. There was already a 1930s walled garden at Mottisfont by garden designer Nora Lindsay. Thomas worked with Mottisfont's head gardener David Stone throughout the 1970s to adapt Lindsay's